Alright, just give me one moment. Let me just tweet the link out. Give me 1 second. Alright, I'm gonna add another edition of Street Fighter as the background. I figured this is a better background than just seeing my little Avi flashing every time I talk. This perhaps will be a little more visually fun. And it might even work with the topic. So, we're talking about the latest US Iran tensions. So, what exactly happened, just for like a little factual background? This morning, what happened was a US spy drone had entered Iranian airspace. Now, Iran argues it was their airspace. The US argues this is international airspace. Regardless, the drone was over the Strait of Hormuz. It was a spy drone, and it was headed toward or around Iran. So the Iranians claim that they essentially had shot this spy drone down over their airspace. Now, that's significant because this means that this drone was just spying on the Iranians. It was not some innocent reconnaissance mission. It was a clear act of escalation. It's an act of aggression. I mean, it is a unarmed it was an unarmed vehicle, but it's still gathering intel for the enemy. And so obviously Iran saw this as a threat and shot it down. Now this is interesting. So now we got to compare what was the technologies that were being used. Now the vehicle that the unarmed vehicle that the U.S. was flying. Now this is a very expensive high-tech piece of machinery. It is supposed to be a high-altitude stealth surveillance vehicle. So essentially, it's not supposed to get caught, and it's extremely high up in the air. And also, if you see some images of the vehicle, it's actually pretty big. This isn't something small at all. And so this is significant because this vehicle cost at least 123 million is what I'm seeing each one. So this isn't just um, you know a $120 million project. This is 120 million for each piece. And so the Iranians were able to shoot this down with a homemade missile system. Now this is also important because earlier this year there were reports that the Iranians were trying to purchase the Russian S-400s. Now the S-400 missile defense system, as we've discussed on the war report with my two friends Constantine and GSP, is the best missile defense system in the world. Now it's expensive too. If you and it's really hard to get. If you look at what Turkey's doing right now, Erdogan is having a lot of trouble trying to purchase these S-400s from Russia. I mean, the U.S. is not giving it an easy time, and they are essentially the ultimate counter to the U.S.'s F-35, so to speak, or their other advanced weaponry. So the Iranians, without the use of the most advanced missile defense system, were able to take down the most advanced high altitude surveillance reconnaissance vehicle. And so this is pretty significant in the sense that the Iranians are spending way less to accomplish their strategic goals than the U.S. is. I mean, this is usually a given considering empire and capitalism, but generally speaking, though, you still have to compare the two combatants in terms of training and resources or what have you. And so right now, it's predicted that the missile defense system that the Iranians used cost somewhere less than $2,500. So This is a very cheap warfare that's accomplishing uh, high levels of success. So the shooting happened, and this was at first it was reported by Iran itself. Let me get this guy. Oh crap. It was reported by Iran first, and the U.S. denied it. The U.S. denied that there was even a drone in the airspace. And then after a little while, it came. Trump tweeted out that Iran had made a mistake, and no one really knew what. I mean, no one knew what exactly he meant. But obviously, at the first instance, one would assume that he was saying that the Iranians made a mistake in deciding to take the drone out. Well, it turned out that later on at the actual press conference that Trump held, it wasn't that he thought that the Iranians made an intentional decision or calculated military decision. He was saying that it was a mistake. That they think that he thinks that the Iranians made a mistake, that this was not intentionally shot down. I mean, granted, again, this is an extremely precise takedown of a high altitude vehicle, but this was somehow being interpreted as unintentional or as a mistake by Trump. And I think that the only way to really interpret this sort of initial response of first denying it and then trying to couch it as this weird mistake when, this is like throwing a Hail Mary touchdown at the end of the fourth quarter, 3 seconds left, and you're down 6 points, right? The I mean, this is really high technology that's being used by the Iranians, especially, but at the same time, you got to understand that there's still probability involved. There's still statistics involved. They could have missed. So my point being is that this would have to have been one of the most highly precise, highly calculated mistakes ever, and so that seemed to be some sort of weird backtrack. Now, what happened was that in addition to Trump's little press conference, there was a meeting, a closed door meeting that happened between what was reported as Pompeo, Pence, let's see who else was it. It was Chuck Schumer, Pelosi, and and John Bolton. How could we forget? How could we forget Colonel Sanders himself? So yeah, Colonel Sanders was there as well, and apparently there's reports by various White House correspondents that that there was a debate between Bolton and Trump. Now, this is this debate is coming after reports. I believe it was yesterday or it was this morning that Tucker Carlson had been speaking to Trump regarding the Iran issue, in the sense that he's been whispering in Trump's ear, letting him know not to be so hawkish, not to buy um, the propaganda. And this was actually pretty good news, but at the same time, it is um, must have been angering to some of the other members of the Trump's admin, because here Carlson is, as a journalist, not a member of the administration, essentially giving counter counter foreign policy advice to Trump's actual officials like Bolton. So apparently the debate was Trump versus Bolton, and Trump was using Tucker Carlson's essential points of, what's the point? And Bolton, representing the sort of neoconservative crowd, seems to be carrying a lot of weight. And this is concerning. That why is Trump even having this debate? Trump is commander in chief. He was actually voted and elected for. Bolton was not. Bolton was a hired by Mech lobbyist before Trump resurrected his career, right? Bolton was a nobody up until Trump's real uh, uh, hiring him. So we have to keep that in mind. Is that how is a man like Bolton, whose career was just resurrected, coming into the office and having immense power like this over Trump? But regardless, it seems like this is a good debate, a healthy debate to be having. On the war report, Constantine has sort of coined the phrase of belligerent non-interventionist as the means of describing Trump. And what this exactly means is that Trump is essentially very loud, barking, but not quite biting. In fact, he's probably retreating as he's barking, if you get what I mean. It's a belligerent non-interventionist, which would explain his sort of foreign policy, Twitter foreign policy, which is what some of the Democrats were attacking him for today. Like I saw Elizabeth Warren was attacking Trump for his Twitter foreign policy, as she was calling it. And so what this means is that um, they recognize Trump's belligerence. But what they don't recognize or refuse to state is why is Trump having to be belligerent. And the reason why he's having to be belligerent is because his admin is staffed with people like MEC agents, FDD agents like John Bolton, right? People who were not elected and are there for other reasons than what the American people want. And so Trump is in this sort of eternal sort of battle with his own administration. And this is why I repeatedly state that Trump is the next Jimmy Carter. And what I mean by that is that Jimmy Carter was in this awkward position right coming up to his the election, the campaign against Ronald Reagan. Up until the election, Jimmy Carter was in this awkward position with especially with the hostage crisis, the Khomeini coming in, the Shah leaving, the Shah not being granted access into the U.S. It was kind of a crazy, it was a shit show. So what happened is that Carter was essentially fighting the people inside his administration. His administration wanted to act on Iran, but Carter did not. And Carter's opponents obviously used this as a sign of weakness or some sign of, not being fit for the job or what have you. And Carter ultimately lost to Reagan. He was a one-term Democrat president. And I see Trump, if you're going to take the sort of intellectually honest position in the sense that Trump is he's listening to Tucker Carlson. He's trying to stay true to his promises as best he can, but he does have this sort of internal, team, literally an internal team uh, in his admin that are pushing him to war. And so it is uh, it is important to see that Trump may have a similar fate as Carter, that his inaction on Iran may actually lead to a loss. And this is funny. This is ironic, right? Because Trump has these tweets where he accuses Obama of starting a war with Iran in order to get reelected. And this is kind of a reference to Jimmy Carter and Bush, where Bush decided to continue the wars. He did get reelected over Kerry. So, the we all know that a non-interventionist populist always gets elected. But what we also have to remember is that a president in war always gets elected as well. And Trump hasn't been at war really, right? He's been managing and de-escalating Obama and Bush's sort of policies, but in terms of actually, waging his own personal wars, can we say this is Trump's war? No, that has not happened yet. Again, Yemen, Libya, even these sort of obscure regions, this is still a continuation of Bush and Obama, right? I mean, it is happening under Trump's watch. This is bad. This is on him, right? He is commander in chief. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we can't label these as Trump wars. The only war that will be labeled or formally understood in the American conscience, in American history, as Trump's war, his definitive war, it will be Iran, just like it was for Jimmy Carter, right? Jimmy Carter knows that he is in a position where His antagonist is Iran. That's who he has to juxtapose himself to in order to win re-election. And so this is a calculation that Trump has to be making, or at least people in his admin, that frankly, no matter how unpopular a war may be, the likelihood of that leading to a loss is slimmer, it seems like. Now, it really depends on how the Democrats will actually use this Trump response, right, or inaction. What you're seeing so far, especially from the presidential candidates like Elizabeth Warren, is sort of calls for a return to diplomacy, the Iran deal, negotiations, what have you. Now, there's a problem with this. Trump's the way he has engaged in exiting the Iran deal and ending waivers, sanctions on various countries. These actions have actually made the Iran deal irreparable. It is basically Trump played his hand in such a way that even if a Democrat gets elected, they're not going to be able to bring the Iran deal back. It will have to be a whole new deal, and that will literally require a whole new summit. And that's just something that, frankly, is not going to happen. It's not possible. It literally is not possible for Trump to just re-sign and rejoin the JCPOA. He and his administration have look at his issues with the EU. Trump's conflict with the EU and Europe is directly involves his conduct with the JCPOA, which has ruined their ability to purchase gas from Iran, which ironically now makes them purchase gas from Russia. But that's a whole other issue we cover on the war part. But my point being is that we're not really in a situation where the JCPOA can even be revived. So the Democrats sort of calls for Trump to re-engage negotiations or what have you. This sort of thing, in relation to the JCPOA, it's done. The JCPOA is dead. And it's not because of Iran. It's not because of, uranium or what have you. I mean, the boomer media, the neoconservative media has been just uh, insufferable. I mean, they were reporting the fact that Iran was shot the drone down as evidence that Iran had something to hide something in Iran, like concentration camps or something. Like, I don't know what these people are thinking, right? But regardless, these people are in this sort of fantasy land where, and not just the neoconservatives, but the Democrats as well, that either A, war will happen, or B, the JCPOA can just be re-signed, like magically made to come back, and it can't. Neither of those will actually happen. The fact that, going back to the drone getting shot down by a homemade missile, what that means is that essentially no, U.S. personnel or flight carrier is going to probably make it into Iranian airspace. And this was sort of already known, right? Remember in the early 2000s military simulation where one general played the Iranian side. And in that simulation, the U.S. was unable to land any of their planes. So we already knew that was going to happen nearly 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But this sort of a homemade missile proved that they have the technology to do it without the expensive Russian technology, which is good. You get more bang for your buck if you can make it yourself, right? And so we're in this sort of situation where how is Trump going to respond? Bolton and some of the Republicans came out and made a statement. Let's see what the statement says. So, Republican representatives Kevin McCarthy, Michael McCall, Devin Nunes, Mac Thornberry are calling for a, quote, measured response. Now, the measured response obviously is not going to be something that Iran will just tolerate. Like, okay, we know we did something bad. You can spank us. We won't do anything back. This is kind of ridiculous. It seems like the statement is more of a let's satisfy our donors. This is sort of like a please the donors uh, statement. So right now there is a call for limited measured responses. Usually what that means is, a random airstrike in an empty airfield, or they actually do hit libraries and schools or hospitals or pharmacies in the case of the early 90s. Let's recall some limited. Let's do a little track through memory lane of other historical measured responses the U.S. has taken. So do recall in the early 90s, Bill Clinton, on the eve of his impeachment, what did he do? He he bombed Baghdad. Do you recall this? He bombed I believe it was like it was either a medical facility or a pharmacy. But regardless, what had happened was from the bombing was that it essentially had uh, denied access to a lot of Iraqis' medical supplies when they had nothing to do with the scandal itself that uh, Clinton was trying to cause distraction from. So this sort of measured response from Clinton obviously backfired because what else did it lead to? There was eventually a blockade on Iraq, which led to the death of 500,000 Iraqis because they weren't getting the medical supplies they needed. So we've been here before. We've been here where we are sanctioning the people. We are going to try to see what kind of uh, how much pressure we can put on the regime. And the thing is that a measured response doesn't seem to always work out. I mean, these precision guided excuse me, I need some water. Give me one moment. These colloquially called precision guide missiles are pretty ridiculous because there is a thing called collateral damage, which is also a terrible term. It is the death of innocent people who have nothing to do with the war, or they're just caught in the crossfire. So the notion that a measured response will actually bring about anything positive is not going to happen because it's either going to, like the two previous Trump airstrikes, which one hit an empty airfield, but still it hit vehicles, I mean jets, and also the other one hit, like, I believe it was like a library or something. But regardless, my point being is that either Trump is going to hurt someone or he's not going to do anything, right? It's not going to actually cause any sort of strategic turning of the tables in the region. So a measured response that these GOP leaders are calling for is basically it is pointless. It is pointless. Let's see what else is going on. So it looks like CNN has ended their live coverage of the Iran issue. So what I take that to mean is that the journalists don't think anything else is going to happen. Usually the White House will uh, release a memo if there's going to be like a impromptu press conference. So unless that happens, which it doesn't look like, it looks like the situation on Iran will die down. I did read a tweet that all the major news networks tonight uh, started leaded with the Iran story, and so obviously it is on the minds of everyone. But I do think this story is just gonna blow over. Um, I don't expect the U.S. to actually respond, even with a measured response. Is it possible that under another presidency this would happen? Possibly. I mean, it's possible Trump is doing his best in terms of trying to keep his campaign promises of not starting a new war. Maybe he is. I don't know. But right now, it appears that nothing is gonna come of this. So with that, we will end this live stream. Now, if you're getting sick of the Street Fighter, let me know. Let me know what you think. I can put something else on. I can try something else out. And if you like Street Fighter, let me know who your favorite character is. Maybe I can try someone else out. But thanks again for joining me. Thanks again for following me. These days are kind of hectic for myself, so my uh, timeline will be a little hectic as well. But do bear with me. Thank you and have a good day.